Income plummet from millions to barely a fraction of its former height. In late 2023, Fremantle and Walliams reached an undisclosed out-of-court settlement. Fremantle issued an apology for the distress caused by the publication of the transcripts. Walliams walked away with a legal victory, but in the court of public opinion, he had lost. The image of a man suing because he was caught saying horrific things on a hot microphone only cemented the narrative of a celebrity who believed the normal rules of decency did not apply to him. You might think that losing his spot on Britain's Got Talent and settling a bitter lawsuit would be enough to force a man into a quiet, early retirement. But Walliams attempted a comeback. He continued to release children's books, appeared on daytime television to tell light-hearted anecdotes, and even hinted at a creative reunion with Matt Lucas. He tried to brush off the scandal, acting as though the passage of a few months or year was enough to wipe the slate clean. However, the entertainment industry had changed, and the tolerance for men who behave with impunity had evaporated. In 2024 and 2025, the true extent of his professional sentence became brutally clear. It was revealed that HarperCollins, the publisher that had made him incredibly wealthy through his children's books, had formally dropped him. This was not a simple expiration of a contract. It was a result of an internal investigation into allegations of inappropriate behavior toward young female staff members. Reports indicated that junior employees had raised complaints about his conduct, leading to a settlement involving a five-figure payout to at least one woman. The publisher reportedly had to implement safeguarding measures, such as ensuring staff were never alone with him and discouraging visits to his home. HarperCollins, under new leadership, made the decisive choice to sever ties completely, stating they would not be publishing any new titles by him. The dropping of his book deal was the final nail in the coffin of his mainstream career, but the hammer kept coming down. The BBC, which had been a long-time home for his adaptations and appearances, quietly confirmed they had no future projects in development with him. Furthermore, it was reported that footage of Walliams performing Nazi salutes during a recording of the BBC panel show Would I Lie to You? In 2024 had been completely edited out of the broadcast. While those close to the production claimed the gestures were part of a misunderstood joke regarding a contestant's mistaken identity, the BBC's decision to cut the footage spoke volumes about their unwillingness to associate their brand with his controversies. The dominoes continued to fall into 2025 and beyond. Waterstones, the largest bookstore chain in the UK, removed him from their highly publicized children's book festival lineups. Even the charitable organizations that had benefited from his millions in fundraising turned their backs. He was quietly removed as an ambassador for the Children's Trust and severed ties with other major charities, as organizations realized that his toxic public image now posed a threat to their own fundraising and reputations. So, when we say David Walliams has been sentenced, we must understand what that sentence actually looks like. There are no prison bars, but there's a profound isolation. He has been sentenced to the slow, agonizing death of a career he spent 30 years building. He has been sentenced to the knowledge that his legacy is no longer defined by the joy he brought to children through his books or the laughter he generated on stage, but by the cruelty of his off-air comments and the disturbing allegations of his workplace behavior. He has been sentenced to a life where major networks will not return his calls, where publishers will not print his words, and where charities will not accept his name. The entertainment industry has effectively placed a metaphorical restraining order on his public persona. Looking at the totality of David Walliams' trajectory, it is a story that serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the nature of modern fame. For a long time, celebrities were allowed to exist in compartments. You could be a raunchy, offensive comedian on Friday night and a wholesome family judge on Saturday night, and the public would rarely connect the two. But the internet has a long memory, microphones are always on, and the public now demand holistic accountability. Walliams' fundamental mistake was believing that his talent, his wealth, and his charitable endeavors granted him a permanent immunity from consequence. He believed that the private David Walliams, the man who made crude jokes at the expense of vulnerable people, could safely exist alongside the public David Walliams, the beloved national treasure. The leaked transcripts proved that these two personas were the exact same person, and the public recoiled.
When we hear the word sentenced, our minds immediately jump to a courtroom, a judge in a wig, a wooden gavel, and the imposing sound of prison doors slamming shut. But in the modern era of celebrity culture, there is another kind of sentence that can be just as isolating, just as devastating, and entirely irreversible. It is the sentence handed down by the court of public opinion, enforced by the entertainment industry, and served in the quiet exile of cancelled contracts, severed ties, and silent phone lines. This is the exact type of sentence that has just been handed down to David Walliams. For years, he was the undisputed king of British family entertainment, a man who could sell out arenas, dominate the Sunday Times bestseller lists, and make millions of viewers laugh every Saturday night. Today, however, the story has shifted dramatically. The laughter has stopped, the television appearances have dried up, and the broadcasting networks have quietly but firmly closed their doors. To understand how Britain's Got Talent's most playful judge ended up in this unprecedented position, we have to look back at the entire trajectory of his career, examining not just the spectacular highs, but the deeply troubling low points that eventually caught up with him. To truly grasp the magnitude of David Walliams' fall from grace, one must first understand the sheer scale of the empire he built. Born David Edward Williams in southwest London, he did not start life as a household name. He was a quiet, creative child who eventually found his calling in the dramatic arts, studying at the University of Bristol. It was during his time at the National Youth Theatre that he met Matt Lucas, a meeting that would fundamentally alter the landscape of British comedy. Together, they forged a partnership that relied on an unapologetic, boundary-pushing, and deeply satirical style of humour. Their creation, Little Britain, became a cultural phenomenon in the early 2000s. It was raw, it was outrageous, and it was wildly successful. Walliams and Lucas became the undisputed princes of sketch comedy, creating a litany of memorable, if deeply controversial, characters. The show transferred from the fringe of BBC Three to the mainstream behemoth of BBC One, spawning live tours, merchandise, and international adaptations. At the time, their style of comedy was celebrated for its daring. Walliams was viewed as a comedic risk-taker, a man willing to go to any length for a laugh. But beneath the surface of this anarchic comedy lay the seeds of his future undoing, as the very boundaries he was pushing would later be viewed through a much harsher, more critical societal lens. As the 2000s progressed, Walliams began to master the art of the pivot. He recognized that to sustain a long-term career in the unforgiving British entertainment industry, he could not remain just an edgy sketch comedian. He needed to become beloved. This transition began with his remarkable displays of physical endurance for charity, most notably swimming the English Channel for sport relief. This feat, which took him over 10 grueling hours, completely rewired how the British public perceived him. He was no longer just the man in the drag suit making crude jokes. He was a gritty, determined philanthropist willing to put his body on the line for a good cause. This rebranding culminated in his most significant career move, joining the judging panel of Britain's Got Talent in 2012. Walking onto that ITV stage alongside Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, and Alicia Dixon, Walliams discovered a new persona. He became the judge who would jump out of his chair, the man who would embrace contestants, the voice of warmth and humour against Cowell's notorious harshness. He was brilliant at it. He won the National Television Award for Best Judge multiple times. He became a staple of Saturday night family viewing. To a whole new generation of children and parents, David Walliams was not the star of Little Britain. He was the lovely, funny man on the talent show who made everyone feel good. This family-friendly image was further solidified by his astonishing second career as a children's author. Walliams signed a massive publishing deal with HarperCollins and began churning out books at an incredible pace. Titles like The Boy in the Dress, Gangster Granny, Mr. Stink, and Demon Dentist flew off the shelves. His writing tapped into a Roald Dahl-esque formula, mixing dark humor, sentimental heart, and grotesque characters, which resonated deeply with young readers. By the late 2010s, he was selling tens of millions of books, earning tens of millions of pounds annually, and his stories were being adapted into acclaimed television films. He had achieved what very few entertainers ever manage: total market saturation. He was on your television in the spring as a judge, in your bookshops in the summer as an author, and on your screens at Christmas in a festive adaptation of his own work. He had built an empire that seemed entirely bulletproof, constructed on the foundation of a sanitized, wholesome public image. But as is so often the case in the world of celebrity, the higher the pedestal, the harder the fall, and the cracks in Walliams' carefully constructed facade were already beginning to show.
The first major tremors in the Walliams empire occurred when society began to re-evaluate the comedy of the past. In 2020, in the wake of the global Black Lives Matter protests, streaming giants including Netflix, BBC iPlayer, and BritBox made the decision to remove Little Britain and its successor, Come Fly With Me, from their platforms. The reason was stark and undeniable. The shows relied heavily on blackface and the mocking of marginalized groups, including transgender individuals, disabled people, and various ethnic minorities. Walliams and Lucas issued a joint apology, stating that they had regretted playing characters of other races for some time and acknowledged that the sketches were wrong. While the apology was accepted by some, for many others, it felt like too little, too late. The removal of the shows forced the public to reconcile the man they saw on Britain's Got Talent with the man who had built his career wearing dark makeup to caricature black women. This stark contrast was only amplified when critics began to dissect his children's books. Activists